A year ago, I retrieved Commander Winfred Leon Buckingham, United States Navy, from a rehabilitation hospital. 97 years old, sharp as ever, proud of his service, quietly stubborn, and very much alone. He had no family nearby, no one left who could care for him. And while the world outside kept moving faster and faster, his world had slowed to silence. So I moved in, not as a nurse, not as family, just as a man who refused to let another man fade away in his own home, unseen and unheard, or a rehab facility for that matter. I watched the holidays come and go, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and not a single knock at his door. No family visits, no phone calls, just me, him, the rest of my family, and a house full of stories that hadn't been told in years. And in that quiet, I realized something. Most people really don't fear dying alone. They fear living unseen. They fear being forgotten long before the end ever comes. This experience changed me. It made me see the cracks in how we love, how we show up, and how quick we are to say, someone else will handle it. So today, I want to talk about what it means to stand in the gap, to be there, truly be there when no one else is. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer another human being is simply our presence.
Let go. Asteroid of fear.
Welcome to the Men of the House podcast, the place where we strip away the filters and talk about fatherhood, self care, mental health, and what it really means to show up for ourselves and for others. I'm your host, Richard, and in this episode, we're going to tailor it around no one should have to die alone. What does it say about our society when we let people die alone? And how can we do better? You know, in this episode, we're going to explore what it really means to be present for someone at the end of life. Not as family, not as a nurse, but as a human being who refuses to let another human being fade away unseen. So, you guys are hearing this Monday, October 13th, but exactly 1 year ago, on October 12th, which I'm recording, I got Buck out of rehab. He had been in a rehabilitation hospital for months and wasn't getting any better. And of course, his insurance was running out, and it was coming time to start paying out of pocket, um, which I'm sure they love. They would love to drain every last cent from you. It's what these long term facilities do. And once they drain you, they put you on Medicaid and drain the government as long as they can continue to get paid. So his options were to go to a long term facility, which was a choice of his daughter, who lived an hour and a half away, or his other children who lived in Nebraska and were in Texas. They just simply could not care for him. And how did we know Winfred? Commander Buckingham? Well, he was a user of a home health services company that my wife had done some work for, or was working for, I guess you could say. And she used to go over there for 9 hours a week, clean, maybe cook them some stuff, prep them some food, take him to the bank, do whatever he needed to do. And then he had a fall. We were on vacation, and he had a fall and ended up in the hospital. Um, and my dad had an accident at the same time. So it was wild. But he ended up in the hospital for an elbow injury. He had like bursitis, I believe, and he had to have surgery on his elbow. And, they kept him in a rehab facility because he's 97, but they didn't ambulate him often enough. And with that lack of ambulation, or standing up and walking for you non medical folks, he became unable to walk. He wasn't getting enough therapy, and he did not want to go to an assisted living. And his family was unable to come or unwilling. I don't know. Not my business, not my place. But he asked my wife, would we be willing to come and move in with him and help him get back on his feet through occupational therapy and physical therapy? I prayed about it. It was pretty much a no brainer. God pretty much instantly said, yes, you're doing this. Um, because my wife kind of has her own thing, and I was podcasting and Ubering and had the most availability. And so I said, yes, absolutely. And, I was excited to help him get back on his feet, get back walking. And it was, man, let me tell you about this day. I arrived early to pick him up. It was Columbus Day weekend. I think that's the holiday we're about to celebrate. And my mom, daughter, and everyone had gone out of town. They went to SeaWorld. I arrived early in the morning. Buck was in his wheelchair waiting, and I wheeled him, gathered up his things, and I'd gone to his house the evening before and set up everything. Actually, my wife, both of us, I think, had gone over there maybe and set up a few days before. I set up a room for me to sleep in because he had his room that he slept in. And then, you know, we got him in the car okay, which was, you know, I don't know. Like I said in the beginning, he was stubborn, but he didn't really want a wheelchair. We had one available, and we had a rolly walker. Um, and the thing was, is we hadn't seen kind of how bad he was. He seemed almost like he was before, like able to walk with a walker, but he was in the wheelchair. And he transferred into the car fairly well. But when we got home, I had to put him in one of those rolly walkers, and push him in to the room to his walker because he was convinced he would be able to use the walker. And yeah, he didn't have a lot of muscle control. His core was flat. And so he's kind of leaning back into me, and I'm having to try and stabilize his his torso as he's sitting on it. And I'm wheeling him where he needs to go. And we get home, and, it's like a kid who's been away from their toys for months because he'd been in rehab for a couple months. He hadn't been home. He wants to be back on his old routine, which included an elliptical, like a little elliptical thing. You might see the ads late night, but basically it kind of get keeps your legs moving for you. It's the ellipse, and he had a special chair, and he did not want to be in a wheelchair because he said it hurt his butt, and he wanted to be in the computer chair. So, like, for the first day or two, oh, it was a hot mess. I mean, I don't know how many times they transferred him, which was rough on me and rough on him. But man, he was in there on that ellipse and had the 5 pound or 2.5 pound dumbbells, like jacking steel, doing shoulder presses as the ellipse is going like double time because he was convinced that, they did not do enough rehab with him and his muscles atrophied as a result of that. And he was unable to walk. And we quickly realized this as he tried to get on his walker and use his walker. And, um, you know, that was the hard part because he was walking on the walker, he was straining, and he just couldn't stand and ended up kind of falling back on me because I'm behind him, and I caught him up under his arms and we sat down on the ground in the hallway and we got up and we tried again. You know, the reality was is he wasn't at that level, but he was hard-headed and stubborn and he's going to do what he wants to do. That's what his daughter said. And that might have been, well, one of the reasons they decided to stay a little bit away or less involved, let's say. But yeah, you know, it was hard. It was super hard. But I felt like this was a calling and not an obligation. And I knew it would change my life. And it did. I can't believe we're back here a year later. That it was a year ago exactly. But I can remember being there because he knew my wife and I hadn't really spent a lot of time with him. I mean, I'd visited him like in the rehab because even though he was in rehab and my wife wasn't getting paid because, if he's not on home health services, you don't get paid because that's where you go to do your work. But she would visit him in the rehab and she was paying his HOA for him, would bring him his check, his bills, do it all out. And then I would go up there with a laptop, let him check his accounts, his Facebook, and different things like that. So, I mean, my wife does it because that's the kind of person she is. And he didn't have anyone else. But she had spent a majority of the time with him and she knew him well. I did not. And so, yeah, it's like two new dudes, like two dogs, two male dogs sniffing each other's butts. Only one's 97 and one's 48. And feeling each other out. But there was one night he asked to sleep on the floor. He went to the floor after trying to walk again, and he's like, "No, just lay me here. It's flat." And I didn't want to, but I obliged and justified it to myself. I said, "Well, if he's already going to sleep on the floor, then he cannot roll off onto the floor, which will be a bonus." So we had a night's sleep, and the next morning I had to pick him up, and let me tell you, son. I don't know if you know what it's like to pick up dead weight. 180 pounds of it, 179, 80, I don't know. He's taller than me. He weighed more than I did. And I'm a little guy. So yeah, getting him off the floor was, I'm going to say a little prayer before that one, but God made it happen. He gave me the strength. And then we ended up going and getting the wheelchair, got some gait belts, which he didn't like. He didn't like the wheelchair. He didn't like the gait belt. The gate belt hurt his waist. The wheelchair hurt his ass. No matter what pads we put on it, he always kind of wanted to be in the computer chair, but the computer chair, unstable, it rolls. And, Mr. Buck he was a fall risk. He'd had quite a few falls, and so he was afraid of falling. And I don't know if you've ever done physical therapy or dealt with somebody who's afraid of falling, but when you're working to transfer them or put them in place, they kind of fight you and resist because they feel out of control. But, initially it was spirits were high. Um, the nurse was going to come. I got him on a Saturday. The nurse was going to come on a Monday or Tuesday, do the eval, and then you were going to have physical therapy, occupational therapy, and we were going to get him going. And in the meantime, I was going to care for him, which included, cooking, making his breakfast, lunch, and dinner, um, changing him, rolling him, transferring him, getting him to the computer and back, um, answering calls, going and getting the mail, many different things. And, I don't know where it was ever discussed or when or how it was said, but, I basically said, hey, I prayed about this and God said, let's do this. And that's either I'm going to help you get better or I'm going to walk you to the end if that's where God decides it needs to go, if that's the time it is. Oh, forgot the little light here for the viewers. Um, but we weren't really thinking to the end at that point. We were hopeful. We were hopeful. And I mean, I think things went well generally. All the therapy we had, we went to the doctors. That was the hassle. That's 100% where the medical system failed. If you guys know me, I used to run clinics. I used to be a practice manager for two clinics that had mostly family practice, but other service lines visited. Um, and I know when we went to like his first VA appointment, we call and set up the transportation like 24 hours in advance. And I remember the girl being like, oh no, you just call and they'll come get you. Like call a couple hours before. And then when I called the next day, they were like, oh, you have to reserve that 24 hours in advance. So yours truly and him, we had to do the transfer solo. And man, it was tough. And then getting him out at the VA, that was a whole other experience. And, if you guys listen to that episode, um, I was infuriated with the VA, 100%. Starting with the police officers there who worked there, who instead of helping me to potentially transfer him out of the car into the wheelchair, uh, he proceeded to give me a lesson how I should be a better planner if I knew this. Mm. To which I told him, yeah, motherfucker, I know. Do you think this would be happening if things had gone as planned? You can be part of the solution or you can be part of the problem. This dude's like 6'5", and the cops, how they stand there all Culero like with they put their thumbs in their little bulletproof vest thing, standing there with their chest out like they're all that in a bag of chips, but didn't lift one fucking finger to help. Just ran his mouth. Yeah. And then we get there. Think we're going to see a doctor, because he's got an indwelling catheter. See about getting that removed. What's the scoop? And hmm, it was like a nurse visit. She wanted to know what kind of, the VA thankfully was going to pay for his supplies. So, like, adult diapers, catheter bags, um, uh, hospital bed, trapeze bar to help pull himself up, and any other medical equipment. And in this process, they're also supposed to send out an occupational therapist for a home safety survey to determine how safe the house is for maneuvering. Um, and, we sat there, we answer all these questions. I think we're going to see the doctor. And it's like, oh no, this was it. And I'm like, well, okay, well, this was kind of shitty. One, I need help getting him back in the car. Well, I'm sorry, but we're not allowed to go into the parking lot. Like, it's a liability for us. Like, if something happens out there, or let's, typical government employee, let's just shield responsibility. Let's push it away, push it on to someone else. Kick the can down the road, get out there, and it's lunchtime. There's fucking nobody to be found to help. And I walk in, and there's the two officers, dipshit, and I forget the other guy's name. But I shouted him out in that Caregiving Chronicle episode because he actually straight up, he, while the other dude was pissing and moaning, this guy was actually helping. This guy came and just fucking, he was like jacked and, not jacked, but bigger than me, in shape and eager to help. And man, he put Buck in there almost like by himself. And I was very grateful for that because I was going to have to get him out of the vehicle by myself. And then we were going to play musical chairs or to the bed or a combination of all of them and have to fight about the gate belt and his stubbornness and him fighting me because he's afraid he's going to fall. He's afraid I'm going to drop him. And I'm like, if anything, you're going to fall on me. And I'm okay with that. So, yeah. And somewhere in there, I hurt my back. My dad brought me this back brace. He brought me the gait belt because my dad had all that stuff from his knee surgeries and whatnot. And yeah, we it was some interesting times. I have to tell them that they're out there. Uh, yeah, you can hear the neighbors. But yeah, it was rough. I hurt my back, and at the time I was wearing the whoop, so I was wearing a back brace every day, throwing on the TENS unit, eating Advil and Tylenol like fucking like I do Tic Tacs now. You hear that? A little ASMR. Um, and I can remember logging in Whoop. It's like, hey, you've logged about this injury for like 20 something days straight. Yeah, it hurt. And I'm trying to work out. And me and Andrew had signed up for the Mammoth March, which was happening in February. And this is October. And at first, I'm not really. I had brought a treadmill, had it in the garage, and it had some walkie talkies. And I told him, like, hey, I'll be in the garage. If you need something, walkie talkie me because he didn't have a cell. Hit me up on the chirp when I showered, and then every once in a while he would wake up at 3 in the morning and ask questions. Or we had like his little life alert charging in there and he saw the green light flashing. What is that? One time he woke me up at 3 in the morning and asked me if we paid the taxes, which we did. So yeah, we had some interesting times. A lot of interesting conversations. Let's get back to these doctor's appointments. So yeah, if they knew they were going to have to send an OT safety survey, why didn't they just ask all these fucking questions then? Okay. Then we go to like his primary care doctor. Another real piece of work. I'll leave his name anonymous. He's old and hmm, I don't know. I'm sure he's done some good, but when we went to that appointment, he kind of, I don't remember his words, but they were just totally uncalled for. We're sitting in there, Buck's in the wheelchair, and we're discussing this, and it was kind of like this. Well, there's really nothing we can do. Kind of like it's that saying, you know. Oh, I think he said just feed and water them, and it reminded me of this saying when I worked in the ER. George Baca, who's also an author. You can look him up. I don't know if he's still alive, but he was a cantankerous old bastard. But he said, yeah, ICU patients are like gardens. You just feed them, water them, and turn them. And that's kind of what this guy said, the doctor, with him in the room. And I just thought it was very insensitive. And I was like, we'll never fucking go back there again. That dude was a piece of shit. And while it could have been the reality, check your bedside manner, bruh. Uncool. Yeah, I used to be a healthcare manager, and I worked in a level one trauma center where you couldn't say no, where you went if you were really sick because people fucking depended on you. And the people who worked there had fucking self respect, and they did the best, and they didn't act that way. If I worked with a doctor that said some bullshit like that, I'd tell the supervising physician who would be too much of a pussy to have any sort of conflict or confrontation with another physician because, yes, they're book nerds. They're not confrontational people. They're not leaders. They don't go to school for leadership. They're just like, well, you're a doctor, and doctors only listen to other doctors or believe other doctors. So, we need a doctor leader title. But, when it comes to having tough conversations, they're always going to defer to the administrator because we're the firers. Um, yeah. But my days, it was a very special time for me. I didn't, during this time, I had kind of stopped doing podcast interviews. I canceled them all. I paused my pod match. And I was doing solo. I was doing a little series called the Caregiving Chronicles. And I would do like an update about Buck, what it was like being a caregiver 24/7, live in. A lot of Fox News. This is October, November leading up to the election. Um, a lot of politics. We talked a lot of spirituality. I was in the Navy. He was in the Navy. He was on the Kitty Hawk, which replaced the USS Independence, which is the one I was on over in Japan. And so we talked a lot. We had a lot of deep conversations, especially about spirituality, because as I had quit drinking and, I've always been spiritual and I've always known there was a God and believed in him, but felt I could never be forgiven, which I told kind of in my series of stories, which was another part of solo episodes while I was with Buck. Because being a 24/7 caregiver, it's kind of like you don't know when he's going to wake up, you don't know when he's going to go to sleep, and you don't know what he's going to need, anything in between. And anything could happen from vomiting to diarrhea, all of it. And it does all happen. Um, yeah. I mean, it's like for all you parents out there, imagine taking care of a child like your baby when they can kind of feed themselves, but they still kind of make a mess. And they're in diapers. You still have to change them. Only make it where he's 97, who is a naval architect and a professor at Texas A&M, smart as a fucking whip, and demanding. Um, yeah, it's a lot of work, 100%, but totally worth it. But the thing was, is I would have to kind of get my shit in wherever I could, like working out, podcasting. I was working on coaching. I got my coaching certificates so I could help people. I oh, what else did I do? Was working on building a website. Thought about changing, getting rid of the Men of the House podcast and changing it to your peak performance partner and being a peak performance coach. And I was like, ugh, really? I mean, this is kind of like what taking some courses and stepping in a direction and it just didn't fit me. It didn't fit the Men of the House. It didn't fit the Waffle House. It didn't fit what I'm about, strangers and stories, and it didn't fit. It was kind of like I have a business coach, and I think I was working with him at this time. But when you want to achieve peace, when peace is what you're looking for, you don't fucking go to a business coach, okay? Because they're gonna have you being entrepreneurs like they are. They're fucking business coaches. That's what they do. Um, which is not totally wrong because being a podcaster, doing my thing is entrepreneurial more so than it is. I haven't stepped back into corporate. Okay. So, yeah. Um, yeah. Don't hire a business coach if peace is what you're seeking. Talk to me first. Hire me. Be cheaper and way better fucking advice. I promise you. But I was crushing it on the system, um, knocking out my goals, getting things in. And kind of the weird thing about this time frame was I don't know if you guys have ever been through any sort of military training or whatever, but it's like you don't know when it starts, you don't know when it stops. Theoretically, kind of like boot camp, it can happen at any time. General quarters, man your battle stations, all that stuff, drills. I mean, you could have a 72-hour fucking drill, mock war, whatever you want to call it. But you don't know when it starts. You don't know when it ends. You have no fucking clue what it's going to require, but I promise you it's going to require everything you got every day. I was exhausted all the time. I want to eat these Tic Tacs so bad, but I don't want to crunch in you guys' ears. So, but yeah, it was a very special time. Lots of deep discussions. And then when my wife would be off, if she didn't have somebody, different clients or anything like that, and on the weekend, um, there would be, she would sit with him so I could have a little time and, in the evenings, get my walk in. Um, since I was going for the 22 miler, exercise, uh, go to the chiropractor for my back, get a massage for my back, go see my dad, just get away. Because Buck lived in this neighborhood that was surrounded by a tall ass, like 12-foot brick wall, like a fortress gated community. Just rows of duplexes, but not a ton. So he had neighbors and whatnot. And this is going to come in later. I mean, that's how he was found, was the neighbors across the street. And really liked those people. They were very nice, but they would notice if Buck didn't come out for a couple of days. They would actually go knock on the door, make sure he was okay, look through the window. And that's when they saw him laying on the floor of his office window, because he had this office with this big drafting table because he was a naval architect. And he had a futon that he absolutely loved. And because he had broken his kneecap and he spent a lot of time in that futon with his leg propped up in one of those straight braces. Um, and that's where he actually slept because it had the right angle for him, kept him lifted up, propped up enough. But yeah, they had seen him through the blinds. He had fallen on the floor, and that's how he ended up in rehab while we were on vacation. But yeah, sometimes I would just have to get out and I'd go see my dad, maybe watch a fight, something like that. And then there was even a couple of times, I think, like my mother would drop stuff off. Um, but I don't remember. My daughter's birthday was in this time frame, and my mom came and stayed with Buck. We got him all set up, and she stayed with him while we went and had my daughter's birthday. So, yeah, even my mom chipped in. But that's how we are. I mean, we're a Latino family. Sometimes we don't say enough, but our actions say everything. My mom did that for me, for us, for my wife, my daughter, to give us that family time. But my mom was also very much a natural caregiver. I've had arguments with my mom. I was like, you treat strangers at the hospital better than you do your own son sometimes. You know, but we're working through that. I don't think it's true. I just think she doesn't know how to say it or express it. It wasn't modeled to her. Um, but I'm trying to change all that. I'm saying it all because I want things to be different for my family moving forward. But yeah, such a special time. And that's why you're getting this episode. You got to listen to me today and not an interview. Um, no, we really, really, really thought he was going to get better. It was always going to get better. And I don't remember when we didn't know. I'm trying to think. But regardless, was we wanted to be there to make sure he didn't die alone or die in like one of those rehab facilities surrounded by strangers and, you know, the AM shift or the PM shift. But it's like brought me to this topic, this reality of making sure nobody dies alone. I don't think elderly people are dying alone because they don't have any family, but their family's emotionally absent. Last Thanksgiving and last Christmas, my wife went to her parents, um, and I stayed back with Puck. I'm not big on holidays to begin with. They were never big in my family. And frankly, I'm kind of this person of me and my wife, like, create our own shit. Let's stop going to other fucking people's shit, okay? Like, we're a family. We can have our own shit. If people want to come here, they can. Why is it that we always have to fucking go somewhere? Fucking hate that. Yeah, you can't tell. That fucking annoys the piss out of me. However, last year, I think I was a little bit over a year of no drinking, and podcast was going well, things were going well, and I was actually looking forward to Thanksgiving and Christmas, and even having to go out of town. Imagine that. You heard how irritated I was like 20 seconds ago. Um, I was actually excited to go. And then what happens? We get asked to do Buck. I'm not going to say no to God. So I stayed behind. Oh, we got to watch the Army Navy game. That was cool because he did go to the Naval Academy. I think class of 49. Any of you listeners know anybody out there? He got in between VE and VJ day. Um, and it was funny. He tells me the story how he got a nomination. His mother had worked for the Democratic Party back then before some of the Democrats switched to Republican for Eisenhower as a new way of thinking, he said, but they worked for like the DNC or whatever they call it. And she used to go around, I guess, the old form of lobbying or whatever you do, be like knocking and talking to people about the candidate you want them to vote for. And she had pitched somebody who was like Republican, and Buck was gonna have to get his nomination from like that person, I think, and was like, oh no, like, my mom was pretty, maybe was my mom, did she say something like strong to him, like where he'd be like, there's no way I'm gonna do it, but I forgot kind of what had happened. Something happened, and kind of this turn of events, this like bigger picture unfolding, if you will, like a God thing. And he ended up, the guy was like, yes, I'll do it. Maybe he switched parties or something. I don't know. I forget how it all hashed out. I have some conversations on my phone, but yeah, I mean, quite an extraordinary guy. Talking about the place we grew up in, him telling me about his father was a carpenter because cars were made out of wood. And that's where he learned. And then they came from like Tennessee area, like along the railway and worked for the rails and all this stuff. I mean, man, I really enjoyed that period of time of my life. It was hectic, took everything I had. Sometimes I was irritable, which I regret, but that was just a very special time of my life. He lived 3.5 months till January 27th, 25. Those 3.5 months felt like forever. It's like military when you spend day and night, like if you're underway on a ship with someone that long, day and night, depending on each other and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I had to change them. For Pete's sake, I'm touching another man's junk. So you get close. That's meant to be funny for all you military service members. You'll get a crack out of it. But the overall topic is serious. We had a great time. I was really hoping he would get better, and I miss him often. I really do. But, you know, if not me, then who? I always say I'm kind, caring, and compassionate. My identity was tied to healthcare service, being a manager and all that. And until I realized, no, I'm about being kind, caring, and compassionate. Those are my things. How I deliver those and choose to act those out is just comes in a different manner. I was looking at some of these notes here, some coming up with these thoughts about the episode and how I want it to go and transition into this other thing, but redefining compassion, like it isn't charity, it's human accountability. What if we saw not letting others die alone as a community responsibility, not just as a family duty? We did this so Buck didn't have to die alone or in a nursing home surrounded by strangers. And I've been meandering around for about a year. Well, not quite. Done some things, figuring out some of my anger. Buck passing didn't bother me at all. What was hard for me, if you guys have been listening, was Buck gave me that what I needed from when I was 7, that look at me to say, I'm okay. Like, once we found out the walk was to the end, you know, I wanted I wanted him to try, but he was done trying. And he was okay. Yeah, I couldn't want it for him. I just broke down. see another man be, like accept this one thing that we're all subject to, that we all wonder about, that we all, whether we admit it or not, have some sort of fear of it, fear of the unknown. We don't know what's on the other side. Those of us of faith can be even, even if you're like, yeah, I have faith, but still scary. And the thought of leaving my wife and daughter behind, that's scary, yeah. But Buck didn't have anyone. His wife had passed away, who lived with him. His daughter wasn't coming. She didn't come for Thanksgiving or Christmas because if he couldn't get out of the hospital bed, she wasn't going to do it. But Buck and I had Thanksgiving dinner and watched some football. I lost my train of thought for a minute. Oh, his oldest son actually passed away when I was there. His oldest son had gone on to hospice and passed. And there was a moment I thought Buck was having some neurological issues because um, the I think his other son called twice the whole time I was there. One time, I think he called when he went on hospice to say he was on hospice, and then the son actually talked to me to let me know that that's what he had told him. And then his son, the younger son, called the day the oldest son passed away. And what was interesting was when Buck hung up the phone, he gave it to me because I would always have to put it back on the charger. He was obsessed about it being on the charger and me bringing it to him each time it rang. Um, he was like, "That was your brother." So maybe he thought I was his oldest or his youngest son with him. Maybe he was secretly hoping it was his youngest son there beside him. So I thought was like, maybe he's got neurological, he is 97, but he's was always with it. So it did make sense. But we eventually figured out when he told me, that he was okay. He refused a pacemaker, and that's what it was. Is his heart was stopping for 6 seconds at a time, and um, no blood would go to the head, and he would pass out or kind of half pass out like a fighter who's getting choked out, and then they kind of come back to life when the blood perfuses back to the brain. And I walked in one time when it was happening and just happened to have my phone and recorded it, and I was able to show the nurse. And so then she wasn't sure. We were like, maybe he's having seizures or something, and so we called EMS, and that was the night that, they as soon as they put him on the monitor, it was all cardiac, and that's the night he refused the pacemaker and said, "I don't have anyone to go home to. My kids are doing that, and my wife is gone." And Jimmy Carter had just passed away too. Jimmy Carter was ahead of him at the Naval Academy, but they were there at the same time. So that's pretty cool. So, I've been doing this and that. I helped another gentleman afterwards, the one that was killing me, where I was getting up at like 4 something in the morning because I would have to be there. Like he got up at 5:30 every day or something, or 6. and I had to be there to get him out of bed every day. Big dude. And then I'd take him for a walk. I love that, but the hours for what it was worth was just it was too much. And they had two other adults in the house who were unwilling to help. The daughter and the partner actually lived there, and it was something weird. And like with the mom, and they had ring cams inside, and I thought that the ring cams were. And she's like, "Oh no, my daughter like watches me," and I'm like, "Oh great, so that means she's watching me too." But I would spend like 4 hours a day with him. I think, yeah, maybe. I think it was, but it was giving the wife a break. Um, and the medical people would come by and do their thing and whatnot. Then we helped out another gentleman, but a lot of the like caregiving stuff, he was like with the other gentleman who was large, like I would help give him showers, and then, I would throw on my swim trunks and get in the showers with him if I had to. Um, but yeah, caregiving it's hard. It is. And so you think about family members who have to do this. Some of them don't want to. Some of them do. And depending on how you are culturally, this and that, the other, some choose nursing homes. And then also, or like one of the gentlemen we helped lived in kind of the development where they have kind of like a cafeteria type of thing. Not really medical services, but his was, you get the room like with your own bathroom, like a sink, no kitchen, but a refrigerator. But like they had a cafeteria you go to every day. All your meals are served as part of your plan. But we were kind of doing helping him, and but the same kind of, he could walk, sort of get around, sort of not. But he had issues with family. Family, I was told last time they were here that he got in an argument with them, cussed them out, and they had moved back to Germany. And here he was stuck in Texas. So, with yours truly. Um, and my wife continued to help him out, but he and I kind of, he was a retired detective, and um, he got kind of entitled and treated me like, yeah, I just drew a line, and I don't care if you are 85, if you're an asshole, you're an asshole. So, and I have self respect, fucking boundaries, and if you cross them, 85 or not. But my wife continued to help him, and he eventually, adult protective services got involved because he, um, uncompliant diabetic. But yeah, he would ask us to take him places because he couldn't ride public transportation. He got banned from riding the city bus for giving the bus driver the bird and cussing him out. So yeah, he was that kind of guy. Still a human. Just, I don't know. I hope he's doing okay, but he's certainly, yeah. But a week and a half ago, I'm in the shower. Joe Rogan. Taylor Kitsch. I haven't seen America Primeval. I heard it's really good. I'm not really into those kind of movies, but 100% into the Terminal List. So, my wife and I were watching that. All about some Jack Carr, some Navy SEALs. Haven't read the books. Jack Carr, you see this? You hear this? Send them on over. Signed copies. Address them to the men of the house. Thank you for mentioning, promoting, and thinking of me. I actually just watched your interview with Anthony Arbito and really enjoyed that. And really enjoying a lot of his interviews as well and kind of what he's about. And him talking about like a buddy he had lived with him and to help out and stuff. And yeah, I'm listening to this podcast because we're talking about help and people and heart. And Taylor Kitsch is saying, I don't know if it's him and his brothers or something, and something about Dewey and I don't know, a hospital and bagpipes. And he makes the comment, nobody should have to die alone. And I'm like, aha, no, they shouldn't. That's what I did for Buck. And then I've told you that you have all these weird ass family dynamics that gets in the way, obstructs, makes it complicated. Um, but then you have people who have nobody. I mean, one of the gentlemen, his family who moved to back to Germany, he's got nobody. And every time he gets somebody, he pushes them away. But, you know, Buck lived in a community. These other gentlemen have people in their own home or live in, while the other guy, his family lived in Germany, he lived in this setup, like I said, with the 3 meals a day. And so there's people around all the time if something happens. But I live in the sticks, and some of my listeners live in the sticks. Partly because we grew up out here. Part of it is they keep building closer and closer. It keeps closing in. Stop it. We don't want more people here. That's why we live here. Okay? Stop coming, please. Um, but I went and visited a friend from high school, or we went elementary, middle, high school, all of it. Just call it a life friend. My best friend knows him as well. Um, but yeah, I went and visited his parents, and I had a lot of fun. And we get one thing straight, like not because they're dying or they were in the same situation. I'm gonna tie some of this together. I'm gonna do my best. Um, yes, I think nobody should have to die alone. That's why I was with Buck. But then I've cared for these other people, and you have home health, and they have a myriad of these services. But when I went to visit my friend's parents and just to talk, um, an outside visitor, they're older, they don't get out as much anymore. His mom gets out more than his dad, but his dad was the one I was there to kind of fellowship with, and because he's like us men. We sure as heck don't want to go shopping with our wives. Not when we're 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 50, 60, 70, 80. It don't matter. No, you know, he'd rather sit in the car. And he's got a lot of wear and tear. He did hard labor. Strong old man. So, but yeah, just, an outside visitor, it's the same way that I have trouble. People see me differently than I see myself. I only see all the problems. I'm me, where I need to get better, where I'm not good enough, where other people say, no, man, you're all right. Other than what you say, and you take accountability for your shit. So, yeah. And I'm working, always working to be better. But yeah, just seeing their faces light up and talking. Spent like 4 hours there, 4.5 hours, and it went by fast. And then I went and got a walk, and um, I just felt good. And, it gave me this idea that I'm going to work on with my business coach because I got to achieve this to get some peace. But if you want peace, talk to me, hit me up, not him. But kind of a companion care service, something rooted in dignity, presence, and emotional connection. We have all this home health and all this stuff, like they're taking care of all this, but it's very transactional. There's a lot of like not as healthcare, but human care, kind of bridging the gap between medical support and heartfelt companionship. I know there's a service I think called Visiting Angels. They have care companions, I believe is what they call them. But they have like it's one of these national things, services, and they run the whole gamut. I'm just a guy, not this big multi corporation, but I want to start something. What is local to me is we live in the sticks. I would like to offer like a service, a peace of mind service. Let's say I'm a couple of hours away from a big city, and maybe you live in the metropolitan area 2 hours away, but your parents still live here. And maybe you subscribe to a service that says I go by there once a week and check on them and talk with them. And if they're under the care of some of these other things, um, I can ask them outside of them, like, hey, are they treating you right, or were they missing anything, or what? I know a lot about how this is supposed to work. I worked in a emergency room in the early 2000s. Then went back to college. I worked in level one trauma center in downtown Austin. So I see where most things enter the healthcare system. I had an urgent care at one of my clinics. So where things enter the healthcare system. And then I had fiscally responsible for primary care, which is managing the overall conditions of people. And then we would have all the visiting service lines from sleep medicine, cardiac rehab. We had physical therapy because we had the gym and all that attached to the clinic. Um, so I've seen kind of a comprehensive care picture. And then working with Buck, being a live in 24/7 caregiver, um, with home health coming, occupational therapy, physical therapy, taking them into the hospice process and that whole deal and walking it all the way to the end with him. So, yeah, I have a pretty good, I would say, understanding of what things should look like. But see, what I'm looking to do is fill in the gap with the humanity. I'm not looking to go there and do their wound care and do the transactional thing. I'm there to check in on them as a person, to let them know that they're still thought about. Imagine even if you're a child and you're like, and I'm like, no, your daughter loves you so much that she pays me to come here and visit with you. and check in on you. It gives her a peace of mind that I can report back that things are okay. You know, maybe you get a job and your family has to move really far away. Someone to check in, someone to talk with for an hour, make sure things are okay. Is there anything not being communicated? Does everything look right? You know, a podcast, questions. I would, you know, with others' permissions at some point. Yeah, I would like to have people and visit them, and should they get in a bind or something happen, you know, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm 2 hours away and they're taking my mom to the hospital. Could you go be with her? I don't have any other family in the area that can. Um, not asking for personal health information. I'm just there as a person. I'm not there to receive results, or if you wanted to put me on a HIPAA, you could. And I could translate in between, kind of like a concierge. But, you know, if you're like, oh, I fucking got to leave work, go home, pack, and then I still got to drive 2 hours, um, yeah, can you meet them there and keep me updated? Stuff like that. I know how all this stuff should work because I did it with Buck, um, and other people. Yeah, there's another gentleman. I mean, we help who get ready for dialysis 3 times a week, and we've moved him from one place to another, and he's doing much better. And but he has nobody. He has no family. He wanted to give up at one point. All he had to do was stop going to dialysis. But if it wasn't for me, my dad, who's his friend, having some of these conversations with him, caring for him, showing him humanity, showing him that somebody cares. He has a brother who lives 45 minutes to an hour away, hasn't called or seen him in years. Last time he did was asking for money. You know, that kind of family member. And I go out and visit him every couple of weeks. I drive an hour, and my dad will make a care package for him. And, you know, we could get Walmart to deliver it and all that. But, you know, my dad will be like, hey, you know, what you would make an Uber today, I'll pay you, you know, 20, $30 to go out there and deliver this package. And like on a Saturday, and because I don't normally deliver Saturdays, and spend time with him and talk with him. And um, I know his whole story. I could interview him at some point, but worked on oil rigs his whole life, is missing fingers because of it, and is in a wheelchair. But he's gotten to where, I mean, he was bad, but he's kind of back. And I was a part of that. My wife was a part of that. But I know they're not the only ones. There's another person that my wife helps, and when she can't, I've been filling in the gap. And um, a gentleman, and he's kind of alone and doesn't really have anyone. And he's confided in things with me of, you know, men things. Both a lot of these people have things that bother them, things that weigh them down, things that, um, with their permission, at some point, I would like to tell it as a story, you know, as part of the podcast, like somebody's story, kind of like when I was doing Caregiving Chronicles. But to talk about somebody who is a human, what did they think about the world? What do they want to leave the world with? What did they think was fair and just or unfair and just? What do they wish they'd done more of? And then tell that. So yeah, it's in the works. I've got some ideas and I'm tying them all together and going to refine it. But yeah, I would like a roster of people, and at some point, perhaps I'll break out the suit, attend some provider meetings, and pitch it and say, hey, if you have a patient that has no family members, no emergency contacts, I know that EMR can filter it that way. Give them my card, send them to me. Do they need somebody to check in on them? Wouldn't it be cool if we could get insurance to pay for that? A human aspect. I mean, we know what isolation during COVID did to people. So, no, I don't think people should have to fucking die alone. One, two. Yeah, they shouldn't have to die alone. And these people, other people, like, shouldn't be kind of forgotten. I've talked about aging in the last episode and that they become the product, the commodity of how people, nurses, and everybody or whatever. And, you know, hey, I want in on the game too. I need to get my beak wet. I need some of that. But I'm not doing it from a place of I'm not gonna sell you something that I know will harm you. You know, I'm out here selling humanity. Okay? That's what I'm trying to push and promote and bring that human aspect back. And yeah, I have a family. I should get paid for my time. Um, but like I said, a peace of mind for you to check in if they're doing these things. Almost a secret shopper, knowing we used to visit these people when they were in rehabs. Why do you think they wanted out of there? Because some of these places are a fucking nightmare. They don't hire the best people. Nobody came back with their own fucking clothes, I can tell you that. They got that shit all fucked up. I mean, the turnover rates there, it's just, you may know some good ones, but there's some consistent names in the business that come up as dog shit each time. So, yeah, what if you're 2 hours away and your family member can't tell you, doesn't have the opportunity, or is incapacitated and can't tell you that they're not taking good care of them? I could be there. So I'm going to figure out a way to make it work. But, think about it. Think about how you show up for others, not just in strength, but in stillness. Sometimes I just had to sit there and listen, watch a lot of Fox News, and just take it as a learning experience. And I'm not saying Fox News like it's derogatory and wouldn't say, one is one. The truth and the best shit for us is probably somewhere in the middle, but unfortunately, they didn't offer a third fucking choice. So, but we did it as a family. Like I said, I prayed about it and we did it as a family. We got to experience this as a family. I know my daughter will carry that experience for the rest of her life. Um, what it means to show up, knowing that he spent his last Thanksgiving and his last Christmas on earth with me, not one of his family members. They could have. You know, my 11-year-old said, she goes, that's messed up. She's like, I would be there for you, Daddy, whether you could get out of the bed or not. And that's all I want, is to raise a good little human being who's kind, caring, compassionate, and who sees the value in others, not from an achievement perspective, not from a monetary perspective. Guess what? You get the same ending as I do, regardless of what hangs on your wall, between your legs, what the size of your bank account looks like, whether you're in a fucking mansion or sleeping out in the woods or on a sidewalk or in a shelter. Hmm. And that's how we can be there for each other. I mean, when it's all said and done, it's so these people are not forgotten. You know, is it that we're afraid of death, or is it we're afraid of being forgotten? When I talk about Dana, that incident's been with me 42 years. I still remember her. And now it's recorded. Commander Winfred Leon Buckingham, U.S. Navy. He's remembered here. He was remembered on Veterans Day. This thing wrote me out some script I could use if I wanted to. Some of it sounds interesting, sounds kind of poetic. Let me read it. Commander Buckingham passed away peacefully earlier this year. He was in his home, surrounded by quiet, but not by loneliness. And when I think back on that time, I don't remember the medical routines or the exhaustion. I remember the laughter that came back into that house, the sound of old war stories being told one more time, the way his eyes would light up when I'd say, "You're not alone, Commander. I'm right here." That's what presence looks like. That's what compassion feels like. And that's what the world needs more of. Maybe that's why I've started thinking about how we can turn moments like that into a movement, a companion care service rooted in dignity, empathy, and presence, a way to make sure that no one, veteran, neighbor, or stranger, has to leave this world alone. Because love isn't just for the beginning of life, it's for the end too. So if you're listening right now and there's someone in your life who's fading into the background, check on them, show up for them, remind them they matter. Because when we do that, we don't just help them die in peace, we help ourselves live with purpose. You know, it's funny. He would always call the Federal Credit Union, the Navy Federal Credit Union, or I think, or USAA, one of them that was started like way back when. And sometimes I would have to take the calls, or he wouldn't realize he was talking to the automation, but he'd be like, "This is Commander Buckingham, member since 19 like or 50-year member, 60-year member, whatever it was. It was bananas." But yeah, and I remember even them addressing him as Commander Buckingham. That was pretty cool. But yeah, being a year ago, my life changed, and I've been praying, struggling. I feel like I closed the loop on death with my fear from Dana getting run over and none of the adults addressing it, to Buck looking at me and telling me, "It's okay. I'm okay, and you're going to be okay." And then he prayed with me, "God bless this man." So after hearing all that, that's what I want to do. There's some of these people I visit that I don't make a ton for. I make, it's not like that. If my dad gives me 30, 40 bucks or whatever to run out or something, that's fine. Like pays for gas and stuff. Um, I'm not going to start like what do you call it, the nonprofit and be voting up a board of directors because frankly, I don't trust a lot of people to uh, take this and care for it the way I will and not make me have to do things that are unaligned in order to make it something that's viable, if that makes sense. So it kind of has to be a pay for profit. And then at some point, I could open up a not for profit kind of line where I could potentially take donations, work with other organizations directly because I'm not looking to make much. I think there did some numbers on there like 30 billable hours a week of, if I could make $78,000 a year, I'd be happy if it paid for some gas, some time, any overhead stuff associated with it because most of it's going to be travel related. And eventually I would like to grow and take it everywhere and get people's stories, people who have no one, sit with them in their final days, weeks, months, whatever. Maybe there's somebody out there I don't know who's a millionaire who needs his story told and thinks, you know, somebody needs to hear what he has to say, what he wants to leave the world with. I don't know. Anything's possible. But what it's about is people who have nobody, people who are alone. Maybe they have family. Maybe their family's just not there like that. Maybe they don't want their family around, but they don't want to be alone. Maybe the family wants someone with them, but they don't want to be around it. There's all kinds of reasons. It doesn't matter to me. For me, it's about me and making sure that person knows, like, you're another human. I want to love and be loved just like you. I want to feel like I matter just like you. And you matter. So we're going to let go and let God He'll figure out the way. He'll figure out the how. I mean, I have a whole PowerPoint and stuff, but I've done some of the work. Don't get me wrong. Okay. Yeah. But it needs some tweaking. As I go along, I get more ideas, and it just takes more shape. But I'm putting it out there on a day like today, which was exactly 1 year ago that I basically broke Buck out of Providence Park and walked him to the end. But as they would say at Chick-fil-A, it was my pleasure. And as we say at the Men of the House, until next time, go out and be the person that you would want to meet.
Let go. Asteroid of fear.